During the Korean War, we saw many similar trends as World War II. A lot of policies simply weren't changed in the 5-year gap between World War II and the Korean War. We saw a lot of refinement in the style of nose art. I think this era has some of the most beautiful and refined nose arts of any era. We saw more nose artists pay attention to the typeface and really experiment with it, like Undecided, which has this really cool looking medieval font. We saw some of the earliest examples of jet-powered nose art on the F-86 Sabre, from pin-ups to jaws, and even a dragon that looks like it's inspired by a dragon and his tail. At the end of the Korean War, nose art policy was tightened up, and the golden era of nose art was over. The military wouldn't allow for such frivolity, and so we saw nose art disappear for a while. We didn't see nose art return until the Vietnam War. We saw the return of bomber nose art on the B-52, like Pink Panther, that was more of a pale violet colour, earning her the nickname Purple Panther. We saw some pretty brash artworks on the F-105, like Pussy Galore and Cherry Girl. This F-105 takes the cake for the worst jaws I have seen. It just starts in the middle of nowhere. It's a great style of jaws, just poorly placed. The F4 Phantom has it figured out. Gorgeous style, great placement, just a really great set of jaws. We saw some pin-ups on the F4 Phantoms, but they were incredibly rare, with most nose art on the F4 just simply being a set of jaws and eyes. We saw more tail art on the Navy F4 Phantoms, like the famous VF-111 Sundowners, or the abstract bird on the tail of the VF-96 F4s. We see two interesting examples of jaws on these F-100 Super Sabres. I personally like the one with the jaws wrapping underneath. It adds a nice pop of colour that excellently contrasts the matte camouflage. We also saw a few smaller symbols and terms on the front of the aircraft. Nothing large or extravagant, but it's just big enough to personalise and individualise the plane. We saw a few nose artworks on the A1 Skyraider, from simple text like Firebird to larger symbols like Lieutenant America. We saw some incredible artworks on the F-104 Starfighter. Some were pretty large like Snoopy Fighter, but by far my favourite on any plane from this era is Pussycat. My love for this work comes from Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum's YouTube channel. More specifically, their Behind the Wings episode on the F-104. They actually have the original plane, unfortunately not with the nose art adorned as it was painted over long ago. We unfortunately only have one blurry colour photo, but it must have been spectacular to see in real life. Originally it was just the cat, but later on they applied the text underneath. I love how abstract and cartoonish it looks. It wouldn't look out of place in an early 2000s cartoon like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Well, maybe except for the cigarette and drink. But by far the best artwork seen were on helicopters. The OH-6 Cayuse scout helicopter doesn't provide a very large canvas, but artists used what little space there was and painted some very creative works, like these jaws. The AH-1G Cobra provided a much larger canvas that many artists took advantage of. We see many examples of very large jaws. This artwork is very interesting. It's a cobra on a cobra. It doesn't look nearly as menacing as the larger jaws, but it gets an A for effort. The Chinook was the perfect platform for nose art, a large, relatively flat canvas that allowed artists to really express themselves. We didn't see many jaws, but we saw far more large artworks, like pin-ups. We started to see more artists focus on the typeface and really experiment, giving us some really unique and gorgeous artworks. By far my favourite is Good Vibrations. It's so fitting of the time period of the 1970s. It's a cool, psychedelic, abstract adaptation of a woman with a fantastic typeface to match. Unfortunately, we don't know the tail number of this heli. so its fate is unknown. I really hope its fate wasn't a commander or higher up telling the crew to remove it, but this more simplistic and, well, boring adaptation has me worried that it was removed and replaced. But the most famous helicopter from the Vietnam era, the UH-1 Iroquois, or the Huey, had some of the most prolific nose art of the conflict. We saw some artists take a more traditional route, painting large draws on the front of the aircraft, such as the 174th AHC Sharks, who flew Huey gunships from 1966 to 1971. In early 1966, they asked the Flying Tigers for permission to use the shark motif on their helicopters. In June, they received permission, and from then on every shark proudly bared the famous teeth into combat. Interestingly, we saw many jets and other helicopters bare the teeth, but the 174th Sharks were the only ones to receive permission from the Flying Tigers. We saw some humorous art like Fish Swims in Booze, or Love Generation, the Tin Bin, or one of my favorites, the Jefferson Airplane. We saw a number of pin-ups such as Tiger Lady, Peg of My Heart, The Good Widow Mrs. Jones, and Strawberry Bitch. The pilot was the son of the pilot who flew the B-24 on display at Wright-Patterson. The company commander also made the pilot of the Huey change it from bitch to blonde because they didn't want nasty words to be on display. Some of the most thought-provoking artworks were on the medevac Hueys. Some were simple, like Blood, Sweat and Tears, So Others May Live, and My Brother's Keeper. But the most intriguing is this medevac Huey at An Key, Vietnam in 1970. It just simply says why. I found this image in a photo essay by Mike Hastie, a Vietnam War veteran and an anti-war activist. The essay was titled "Lying is the Most Powerful Weapon in War," so it's obviously an anti-war sentiment. I find it strangely more beautiful than the complex nose art shown. To me, it's a reminder of the reality of the conflict. Young men sent to die in a war that many did not understand. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and apologize for the long wait. I would love to hear what your favorite nose art of this era was in the comments below.